Hello, MCU fans. Today we're going to take a look at your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man tie-in issue number 5, the last issue in the series. I've had so much fun covering these issues. Here's 1 through 3, 4, and of course 5, which we'll be looking at today. So there will be spoilers, but as long as you're okay with that, then let's dive right in and see what we can find out. Don't forget, we have an April contest running all month long. Be subscribed and leave a comment. You could win a book or a steelbook. Best of luck. And we have a membership option with lots of cool perks, so you might check it out in case you're interested. All right, so I always love to start by mentioning how the tie-in comics fit in with the Disney Plus series timeline. Remember that the series started on Orientation Day, which IRL in 2015 was September 9th, and this is happening, therefore, in September of 2015. Then, of course, Peter got bit by the spider, and then the series jumped a few months later. Well, those few months are encompassed by, at least in part, this comic series. In fact, the series seems to take place over a couple weeks because it goes back 2 weeks earlier to start to tell the story. So we are going to get a very firm timeline by the end of issue number 5. So speaking of issue 5, let's get to the breakdown. Let's talk about where we left off. Remember, Peter had a little zip drive that he was going to sneak onto Silvermane's computer so that Nico could get information about his illegal operations and send it out to the news. That part worked really well. The problem is, Silvermane had some big-time bodyguards. The Ox, Fancy Dan, Montana, and Man Mountain Marco. If you remember, the Enforcers first made their appearance in Spider-Man 10, and Man Mountain Marco and Silvermane in Spider-Man 73. Unfortunately, even though Spider-Man was able to web up Montana and Ox, Marco was able to hit him right over the head with that planter, and now that he was knocked out, pick him up and basically chuck him off the building. Yikes. In fact, he's realizing this was probably a really bad idea, and even we left him calling out to Nico and Aunt May saying, "I'm sorry." So, wow, really looked like this was a bad place for Spider-Man. So, let's pick up with issue 5. Now he's hearing Nico calling out to him, "Do something. Are you really going to fall to your death without even trying to stop it? It would be just like you to die of underachieving." I love Nico pleading with him, yet throwing out a little insult at the same time, right? Anyway, he says, "I'm sorry, my web shooters are out of commission. I appreciate all you did to help me. You've been a really good friend." So yeah, he's just saying goodbye to everyone. Aunt May, oh my word, she says, "Please, please, you can't leave me alone." And he says, "I don't want to, but maybe in the end you'll be better off. Less worrying about money, less responsibility." And then the big one, Uncle Ben, which is kind of cool, since we've really not seen Uncle Ben inspiring Peter, like either in the series on Disney Plus or in the comics. This moment was really special because Ben, at least in his mind, in Peter's mind, is saying, "You know that's not true. May will be devastated, like when she lost me." And he's calling out to Uncle Ben. And this is big. He says, "When I was dying, what gave me comfort was how proud both May and I are of the man you're becoming, a good person, someone who fights for people he loves and never gives up. Am I right?" He says, "I miss you so much." And he says, "I miss you too. I will always be a part of you. Now let's see you prove it." So this is another good reminder that at least in this universe, Uncle Ben died of a sickness that made him bedridden, and they were with him as he slowly passed away. So, all right, that gives Spider-Man the strength he needs to fight for life. He says, gotta wake up, gotta wake up. He reaches out to that American flag, which doesn't hold his weight, but got him closer to the building, hopefully enough to reach the wall, let my sticking power do the rest. Come on, he says. And yes, he's able to grab onto the wall, and it swings him so hard that he actually passes out from the effort, but he's left hanging on the wall. I think that's kind of cool that his stickiness is still working even though he's completely passed out. So back up top, we see Silvermane saying, "Fancy Dan, Marco, go make sure he's dead." Because remember, Ox and Montana are still stuck on those webs. So sure enough, they go down and they find him passed out and stuck to the wall. There, he must have grabbed the wall but knocked himself out. So Fancy Dan says, "There's nobody around, let's make it permanent and start shooting at him." Fancy Dan is a jerk. Anyway, that's enough to wake Spider-Man up, and notice his spider sense is tingling. So it seems that it activates whenever he is in dire danger. And I'm okay with that. I mean, it would be kind of a bummer if he was always dodging every single blow. Instead, it seems only when he's in extreme danger does it activate. So this is interesting. Notice Fancy Dan says this punk's got the luck of the Irish. And he says, "Hey, I am part Irish. Maybe I should have gone with the theme, Leprechaun Man. Now then everyone would want me to do an accent and I can barely manage basic New York." Okay, were you as thrown off by me by this idea of him being part Irish? Now, I did do some research, and actually, the nationality of the name Parker is British and Irish. So maybe that's what they're getting at? That somewhere in his family line, the Parker family line in particular, that there's a bit of Irish in him? That's fascinating. Let me know your thoughts on that. But I mean, I've been a Spider-Man fan since I was a kid, and I did not know he was part Irish. But there is at least one Spider-Man that we know is Irish. That would be Miguel O'Hara, right? I mean, definitely, with a name like that, we knew he was Irish. But I just did not know about Peter Parker being Irish. Fascinating. All right, so Marco then punishes him once again, this time throwing a trash can at him. My goodness. So now Spider-Man's down on the ground, and Marco says, "We don't need no guns." Nice English. And then just demolishes him with a punch right to the face. And then Fancy Dan looks like he's coming in for the kill. Like, will this be the end once again? Because he says, let's finish him off up close and personal. But finally, Spider-Man starts to fight back. He says, yeah, that works for me, but don't get too confident. He says, give me back my hand right as Marco's coming in. And I love that he pulls Fancy Dan into Marco's blow. About time somebody else got punched in the face by Marco, right? So then he leaps out of the way, says, you guys fight for money, but I fight for something bigger, my neighborhood. And he uses that to inspire himself to withstand a direct blow from Marco, to which he's like, well, that was my best. So wait, please, what do you want? And he's like, well, I want you to remember how you feel right now, because that's how you made the people of Queens feel. And I want you to tell everyone else in your line of work. Boom, just smacks him upside the head. Spider-Man's flipping the script. Oh my goodness, finally takes down the enforcers and Marco. They were really bugging me. So love that shot right there. All right, now up top, we have Silvermane trying his best to get the press to stop running with those stories that Nico leaked. He's calling his lawyers, trying to get them to do anything they can to make it stop. Then he hears a thump. He says, Marco, is that you? Is it done? Well, it's done, but not the way Silvermane expects. I love that Spider-Man just throws the unconscious Marco and Fancy Dan on the desk, and then Silvermane starts pleading with him. What do you want? I'll give you anything. And he says, I want one thing, basically. I want you to get on the phone and tell your lawyer to drop all legal threats. The news outlets are free to use what I leaked to them from your database. He's like, but I'll be ruined. And I love Spider-Man staring at him like, do you think I care? Do you think I care? You basically had your guys chuck me off the roof. I am very mad at you. So he says, fine, gets on the phone, drop all actions, no more threats. You heard me. And I love this. Spider-Man says, look at the bright side. You'll have the best hair in prison. Ouch. So now it's time to celebrate with Nico. She's watching as the shocking evidence continues to pour in regarding the criminal activity of Silvermane, and in walks Peter, looking pretty beat up. She's like, Pete, you did it, but what happened to your face? And I love his ability to lie, but to do a terrible job in the process. He says, I found out where Silvermane's brother-in-law lives, the guy who owns their real estate company on paper, and I managed to sneak in, hook the device up to his PC. He's just a normal guy, wasn't that hard, except it turns out one of Silvermane's guys does watch his place, and I got away, but fell down some stairs. Oh my word, dude. You got to work harder. You got a black eye and a scratched up face from falling down the stairs? Anyway, his lie is actually going to get worse with Aunt May. And then Nico says, hey, Pete, do you think this will save Midtown High? Which, it's a good point. In the Disney Plus series, they never talk about Midtown again. So I really like that they cover that in this comic tie-in. And he says, we'll just have to wait and see. All right, so now we finally see Peter is back home with May. She was about to text and ask where he was, and he says he got caught up at the library. Hank Pym did some really groundbreaking work. And actually, timeline-wise, this is kind of interesting because we're in September, October timeframe of 2015. That's right after the Ant-Man movie ended. So yeah, after that movie, probably Hank had a lot of new information to share. All right, so then, oh my gosh, this lie is the worst. Then he fakes a trip so that he lands face first into the books, right? And she says, oh, look at your poor face. You got to be more careful. And he's like, it's not really that bad, just scrapes and bruises. The books broke my fall. Oh, my word. Worst lie ever. You got a black eye and those scrapes from the books. But in fairness, if you've been watching Daredevil Born Again, and no spoilers if you haven't, but notice that Matt is just about as bad at lying. He gets these massive bruises from a fight with someone, and Heather says, well, you didn't get those bruises at work, and he says, I went for a walk, I'm having trouble sleeping, and basically I fell down. Oh my word, Matt and Peter have the worst lies ever for their injuries. Why does anyone believe them? Anyway, so Peter convinces May he'll be okay. She wants to take him to urgent care, but he says, I'm fine, Scout's honor. And then he says, well, guy who quit the Scouts because camping scared him's honor, at least. So I just think I should go to bed. Nope, she doesn't want to do that. Instead, she wants to watch another episode of, in this case, The Ultimate Bachelor. So keeping in mind that we do see them watching The Bachelor in the series, but the series is happening more in the spring semester of 2016. So that means in the fall semester, basically in the fall, The Ultimate Bachelor's on, in this universe at least. And then in the spring, we get the regular Bachelor. Craziness, right? A lot of Bachelor in this universe. So now we move to Monday morning at Bales High, and Peter and Nico are chatting. She says, you okay, Pete? You seem on edge, and it's freaking me out. He's like, no, everything's fine. If there was danger, we'd know by now. I just keep expecting someone to, and suddenly someone behind him calls out for Petey. He screams, and it turns out it's Pearl. So we're going to see in a minute how this fits in with the Disney Plus series, but notice she says, I didn't know you went here. So this is the first time they're realizing they both go to Bales. And he says, yeah, for now, just until they rebuild Midtown. So at this point, he and Nico are still assuming they're going to go back to Midtown High. Really interesting. So Nico says, you didn't tell me you liked older women. And she's like, only a little older. And he was really shy. And she says, but our teddy bears did have a pretty torrid thing going on. Sorry you're only here temporarily. I hear good things about you both. And he's like, wait a minute, like what? And she says, well, everyone says you stood tall trying out for football, which remember that happened a couple issues ago, and got up every time you were knocked down. And Nico, you put those trust fund jerks in their place. Man, I've been dying for someone to do that. Anyway, I got to go to class, but let's hang, okay? All right, so now let's try to tie this in with some of the stuff we saw in the Disney Plus series. See, I'm betting Lonnie became such good friends with Peter because of Peter trying out for football. Yes, it was an epic fail, but since Lonnie is a quarterback on the football team, I bet that got some street cred for Pete. So that's pretty cool. And this also fits really well with Pearl's first appearance in the Disney Plus series. Because remember, we could definitely tell Peter's been pining after Pearl for a while when he sees her. But notice, they're not doing some first introductions with each other. That's what's happened in the comics. Instead, he's just saying, oh, I'm sorry, Pearl. I didn't see you there. And she's saying, oh, Petey's always been a bit clumsy. So it's interesting. The Disney Plus series almost made you feel like they were first running into each other. But no, now we know he's been thinking about wanting to date her for a while and has been very afraid to do so. And I love that Nico refers to it as a May-December romance. That's basically saying that somebody younger, Peter, which is represented by May, wants to date someone older, Pearl, which is represented by December. Anyway, he's trying to deny that it's not like that at all when a staff member walks up and says, hey, can I have a minute? So she says, I don't know if you've heard, but after the Silvermane revelations, donations have poured in to repair Midtown High. A huge grant from Stark, love the Iron Man reference, clinched it, and they're going to rebuild the school. So at first I was really scratching my head going, wait, no, they can't go back to Midtown High. We know they stay at Bales. Anyway, she says your academic performance is excellent and we're looking for a more well-rounded student body. If you're interested, you're both invited to attend Bales through your senior year. Think about it, okay? All right, so that makes sense. They're now being offered the option to stay. But also, does this lady look familiar to you? You might remember her as one of the teachers from the Disney Plus series. In fact, they always wear the same set of clothes, so it makes it really easy to tell that, yep, that's the same staff member. So that's really cool. I love how they tied the comics and the Disney Plus series together so well. So Peter asks, what did she mean by well-rounded? And leave it to Nico to just say it straight up. She says they need more poor kids so they don't look like they're a finishing school for rich jocks. Doesn't matter anyway. What matters is, what do you want to do? So I love this. He says, well, if you'd told me I'd say this a month ago, I wouldn't have believed it. But, and then she's like, you ran into your hot ex-neighbor. I won't lie. You're punching above your weight class, but with me as your wing woman, you might have a shot. So that's cool. What makes them decide to stay at Bales, ironically, is Peter wanting to chase after Pearl in hopes of maybe dating her. Also, he says a real key line there. If you told me I'd say this a month ago, that is a major timeline indicator telling us they've been at the school for about a month, meaning we're probably in mid to late October. Love that. Anyway, he says, I don't have a thing for Pearl. I just feel like we've laid a good foundation at this school. Yeah, whatever, right? She's like, yeah. This is going to be a major project. Lucky for you, I like a challenge. First thing we got to do is work on the line between flirty shy and just plain annoying. Anyway, see you at lunch. So the funny thing is, if this is late October, and if you've seen my breakdowns on the Disney Plus series, you know that that's sometime in early January. That means for a couple months, Peter's trying to get up the courage to ask Pearl out. And then it's too late, obviously, because Lonnie asks her out. Anyway, Peter thinks to himself, I do feel like I've got a good foundation here. I may not be a football star or the heir to a fortune, but maybe that's just fine. And then we see him back on the job as Spider-Man. He says, things aren't perfect. Money's still tight as ever. Splitting time between school and spidering is going to make it tough to keep the grades up. And it's pretty clear Spider-Man isn't going to be the next Captain America, as some jerk shouts menace. But notice he's looking back at Spider-Man and in the process almost hits a truck. And of course, Spider-Man saves him, but the dude's like, that was your fault. Anyway, Spider-Man says, I may not even be the next pizza rat. Now, that's a really funny reference, of course, to the famous rat that ran off with a giant piece of pizza and made the news and the headlines and the memes in New York City. That's too funny. Love it. So then he says, but I came up against some serious challenges and made it out the other side. Not all by myself either. So there he is, heading into Queens. Then we see him heading into action against a jerk holding up a hot dog vendor, and he thinks to himself, Peter Parker has May, Nico, a new school. And Spider-Man, well... But we have to hold that thought because the hot dog vendor wants to repay him, which is awesome. Says, thanks, Spidey. Nice for Queens to have someone looking out for us. You want a dog on the house? And he says, now that you mention it, I am pretty ravenous. Can I get cheese and relish on that? Don't push it, kid. I could have took that punk myself. Love it. Anyway, he says, the people in my neighborhood know what I'm about, and that's good enough for me. So he's chomping on his hot dog as he's swinging into action. And then they tell us, thanks for reading. Follow Spidey's adventures in your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man on Disney Plus, which is a slightly longer way to simply say the end. Love it. So let's wrap up this timeline. You might remember issues 1 and 2. I gave this timeline. Issue 3 had this timeline, and issue 4 had this timeline. So now we can add issue 5's timeline to the list. Pretty simple timeline. We have Spider-Man defeating the Enforcers and Marco, forcing Silvermane to let the press share the info, Peter celebrating with Nico as he gets patched up by May, and then on the next Monday, deciding to stay at their new school as Spider-Man heads off on his adventures. So, yeah, I think, therefore, if we add all this together, plus Peter's comment about if you'd asked me a month ago, then I think when they gave us this weeks earlier, that it's encompassing 4 weeks, basically from mid-September to mid-October. And I've added all this information on my Google timeline sheet, and I'll leave a link in case you want to check that out. So thank you so much for joining me on this journey through the comic tie-ins. I've had a lot of fun, and let me know if there's other comic tie-ins you'd like me to cover. I'd love to do more in the future, so let me know what your suggestions would be. And don't forget that contest. Be a subscriber, leave a comment. You could win a book or a steelbook. And we have the membership option in case you're interested in that. And then I always love to mention the Discord. Here we are in the MCU official tie-in comic section. Hunter does such a great job of breaking these things down. In fact, he has information on all of the tie-in comics. Really good resource. Also, we do have the Doomsday 1-year countdown watch parties starting, well, this weekend, April 25th, and going all the way up to May 1st when Avengers Doomsday comes out in the theaters. So we have 2,100 members across the globe, conversations 24/7, and I'll leave a pinned comment so you can join. Also, if you don't mind, like this video, subscribe if you haven't already. You can check out more content, and we'll all continue to enjoy the ever-growing, the ever-changing Marvel Cinematic Universe.